Welcome to Kingdom of the Logos. I'm J. Dylan Proctor.
And I'm Anthony Allegria.
We're going to be talking about holiness, and we're going to do this using the example of the Gen 3 Glock 17 RTF2. I'm a clergyman in a holiness denomination, specifically from the Church of the Nazarene. And throughout the history of the holiness movement, there's been this notion that the human condition can be elevated through the process of sanctification. Sanctification is a process which can take people closer in proximity to the holy nature of God. As I look at the culture around us today, I've realized that as people are increasingly identifying as agnostic or atheist, we have not lost the concept of sacredness and holiness as one might expect, but instead, these concepts have merely been dislocated. We would have expected them to be left derelict, thrown to the side, but this really hasn't been the case.
So what could holiness have to do with a Glock?
The Glock RTF2 models were introduced in 2009. However, they were only produced for a short while because they created a bit of a controversy within the Glock community. RTF stands for rough texture frame, and if you were to hold an RTF2 Glock, you would notice that the grip texture was quite a bit more aggressive than what you would find on your normal Glock. However, the biggest difference aesthetically was found on the slide. The serrations on the slide were curved, looking a bit like fish gills instead of the standard straight Glock serrations. And this was a deviation from the highly consistent Glock form. And it was received rather interestingly by the Glock community. Some people responded almost as if this was blasphemous, because it had challenged the consistent nature of the Glock. Here we have a few different Glock models to really demonstrate the difference in the slides. And I now realize that I probably should have brought some more casual Glocks that don't have accessories. This top Glock is the RTF2 with the curved serrations. You'll notice at the back of the slide, these lines here are curved. If we look at the serration lines on this Glock 21 SF, they are straight. And the same on the Glock 43. This is something which is found throughout all Glock models, the straight serrations, except for the Glock RTF2 models. The Glock RTF2 models were slightly deviant enough from the consistent Glock form that they initiated a response from people that was very much like disgust. It was as if they had seen something come and contaminate the DNA of Glocks. Now, Glocks are built around this notion that in a high-stress situation, people are not necessarily going to have full control of fine motor skills, and they'll be relying on gross motor skills. And the Glock is designed with very consistent features that are minimal but reliable. You can expect all Glocks to feel the same, to look the same. And these RTF2 models challenge that ever so slightly.
But as we saw, the texture and the fin gills on the side could be enough to completely contaminate the Glock form.
Yeah, and this is something which is interesting because it reveals something about human nature as a whole. As people, we have this tendency to take certain things in life and recognize them as being transcendent. Just like with the Glocks, there's a transcendent form which is found on all Glock models. And as a species, whenever something contaminates the transcendent, we tend to react to it very badly. That is, if we're someone who behaves in a religious manner where that particular thing is held as transcendent. And again, as our culture has increasingly really tried to cast the moral structures of the Judeo-Christian value system to the side, we could have expected people to be less religious, but I don't think this has been the case at all. What I think has actually happened is people have instead of becoming a-religious as they have become atheistic, they have still maintained a religious structure, although they have removed God from it, or at least they have removed a divine being from the role of God. People have found all sorts of things in the world to hold as transcendent. Whether it be certain ideologies, certain maxims, you can find people who are very religiously vegetarian. You can find people who are very religiously, or they have a religious disposition to their environmentalist ideology. And the same is found in whether it be politics, in music, and just about anything you could imagine. People have a tendency to hold certain things as transcendent. And this is very interesting. It really is. All right, we're going to watch a clip here that is something I personally find to be rather sad, But it's also very interesting at the same time because this girl is reacting to people speaking at her college campus that she disagrees with. But specifically, she is reacting as if she has just experienced blasphemy. She's reacting as if something disgusting has just come and contaminated a place which she considers holy and sacred. All right, so again, this is something I really find personally to be quite sad, but at the same time, it's an excellent example of how people have dislocated the notion of sacred from being something associated with God to being something quite different. Again, we would have expected, as people have increasingly identified as being atheist or agnostic, that they would cease to be religious, but this is hardly the case. I firmly believe that as people have become more atheist and agnostic, they have done so without becoming a religious. In other words, they are actually functioning as religious people, although something else has replaced God. Anthony, I want you to read for me a little bit from OxfordDictionaries.com, some of the definitions they have regarding religion.
Here are 3 of their definitions. The belief and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods, a particular system of faith and worship, a pursuit or interest followed with great devotion.
I find it interesting that as we examine all 3 of these definitions, again, they're from OxfordDictionaries.com, not one of these 3 definitions explicitly say there must be a God in order for people to be religious. In fact, it just says people must believe in some sort of transcendent system in order for them to be religious. As we look at this girl who is reacting to a speaker that she does not like, she is behaving again as someone who has just experienced blasphemy. And this is something which really troubles me, because the notion of sacredness, the notion of holiness, are not being properly positioned in society. They've become quite dislocated. They're still there. They're just dislocated. So as we've discussed these examples, one of the things that we can find is that people find transcendent things in life. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And again, I'm not comparing social justice warriors to people who appreciate Glocks. What I am saying is that as a species, we have a great tendency to value certain things in life as being transcendent. Now, when it comes to the issue of morality, it's important that we have the right things be in the center of our moral structure. As our society has tried to throw out the Judeo-Christian moral structures, what we have seen is not that people would go out and be freed from religion, but instead that they would find a lot of primitive, incoherent religions to structure their lives around.
And you know, what I think is interesting is that our biblical ancestors saw this and understood it as idolatry, that people would go and they would see the transcendent form of things and they would overvalue it, which is, I think that's the most important part of the sin, is the overvalue. Because, right. I mean, to simply find what is transcendent, that's important for human beings to do, you know, to be able to recognize that there's a transcendent abstract form of a Glock, and that's what all Glocks are going to attempt to represent. That's important for human beings. Otherwise, you know, we couldn't categorize anything. Right. But it's the overvaluing that is whenever it becomes idolatrous. And I think it's so crazy that, you know, 5,000 years ago, give or take less, and then, you know, in the time of Jesus as well, so definitely at least 2,000 years ago, people recognized these idolatrous tendencies in human beings, which we're only just discovering empirically anyways, you know?
Yeah, this is something which is really interesting because, again, finding transcendent things in nature is not a bad activity. Again, drinking water is healthy. Learning that we go to drink water to quench thirst, that's a great thing that transcends time. And even finding that there's a transcendent structure for Glocks, which is reliable, it's consistent, it's a quality firearm, that's not a bad thing. However, it's the rate in which we appreciate this and we put it at the center of our moral structure that becomes a problem. When people get to the point that they want to reject all ideas that might contaminate things they hold sacred, that can be a bad thing. Because, again, as we have seen people increasingly be atheist or agnostic, we haven't actually seen them become a-religious. They've just become religious about other things. And this is a big problem in society. There really is something transcendent about the nature of Glocks, which each model really follows. However, It should not be something which is treated as sacred or something which is treated as holy. And for all the people I know who own and partake in firearm operation, none of them treat Glocks as if they are holy or sacred. However, in society, there are many things which people treat as holy and sacred which should not be. We, as a people, we need to fix this dislocation of holiness and put it back in its proper place. God is the center of holiness, and that is where holiness and the sacred should be. And on that, I hope you enjoyed our video. Please subscribe to our channel. Please follow me on Twitter. You can follow me at jdyllanproctor. Follow us on Facebook. You can just do a search for Kingdom of the Logos. And of course, we're on iTunes and SoundCloud. And with that, have a blessed day.